Hello, this is Professor Asma Parveen from Department of Psychology, Aligarh Muslim University. I have talked about sampling in previous lectures. Now I am continuing with the same sampling topic, and today I will discuss the qualities of an ideal sample. In order to accurately understand and analyze a population, it is crucial to have a perfect sample that truly represents the entire group. This means that the samples chosen must possess the same characteristics as the population they are meant to represent. By doing so, researchers can ensure that their findings and calculations are valid and applicable to the larger population. Without a perfect sample, there is a risk of bias and inaccuracies in the data collected, which can lead to flawed results and misleading interpretations. Therefore, careful consideration and selection of samples is essential in conducting meaningful research and drawing reliable conclusions. In order to create a representative sample, it is crucial that the units within the sample are independent. This means that each unit can be interchanged with another unit, ensuring that every unit has an equal opportunity to be selected for the sample. By maintaining this independence, we can confidently assert that our sample accurately reflects the larger population of individuals. Next quality is adequate. To draw conclusions about the larger population, it is important to have a sample that is adequate in size. This means that the number of individuals being studied should be large enough to represent the entire population. Additionally, the characteristics of the individuals within the sample should be similar to each other, that is, they are homogeneous to each other. If there is too much variation among the participants, the results may not be reliable or applicable to the larger population. Next characteristic would be precise data. Collecting data in a precise manner is also very crucial for obtaining reliable results. The methods used to gather information should be carefully chosen to ensure accuracy. By using rigorous and standardized techniques, researchers can minimize errors and increase the validity of their findings, and this allows for more confident generalizations about the population. Furthermore, it is important to consider how the collected data can be applied to a larger population. The results obtained from a specific sample should be relevant and applicable to a broader context. This requires careful consideration of variables being studied and how they relate to the target population. So, our data should be very precise and should be collected in precise manner. Another quality would be for an ideal sample, the number of participants in our study should be large enough to provide reliable data. That is, the size of the sample should be sufficient but not so large that it becomes excessive or impractical. Additionally, it is important to ensure that our sampling method is accurate and free from any errors or biases. To draw reliable conclusions with a small margin of error, it is crucial to have a precise and accurate sample. The sample would be specific enough to provide accurate information and eliminate any ambiguity. Furthermore, the sample needs to be random, ensuring that every individual in the population has an equal chance of being chosen. This helps to eliminate bias and ensures that the sample represents the entire population accurately. Feasibility or practicality is another important factor to consider when we are determining the sampling method or sampling size. Researchers must take into account the available time, resources, and data To ensure that the chosen method is feasible, it is essential to select a method that can be executed efficiently and effectively within these constraints. By following these guidelines, researchers can gather samples that provide valuable insights into the characteristics of the population being studied. So, in conclusion, we can say that conducting a study that produces accurate and reliable results requires careful consideration of the sample size and sampling method. Researchers must find the right balance between having enough participants to ensure meaningful results and avoiding an excessive number that could introduce bias. The sampling method employed should minimize errors and biases, allowing for conclusions that closely align with the characteristics of the entire population. Precision is crucial as it enables reliable conclusions to be drawn with a small margin of error. By eliminating bias and providing equal opportunities for all members of the population to be included, researchers can obtain unbiased and representative results. Finally, the chosen sampling method must be practical and feasible within the given time, resources, and available data. Following these guidelines will enable researchers to gather samples that provide trustworthy insights into the characteristics of the population under study. Now, I will discuss ethical considerations in sampling. Ethical considerations play a crucial role in research studies, ensuring that the results are honest, accurate, and fair while also prioritizing the rights and well being of the participants. One key aspect to consider is fairness and equality, where researchers must ensure that every individual in the study group has an equal opportunity to be chosen. This approach helps prevent any unfair treatment or the bias and ensures that the group being studied accurately represents the larger population. Informed consent is another vital consideration. Prior to inclusion in a study, individuals must fully comprehend the purpose and nature of the research. This entails understanding why the study is being conducted, their role within it, as well as any potential risk or benefits involved. It is essential for researchers to provide clear and detailed information regarding participant selection and the task they will undertake during the study. By doing so, participants can make informed decisions about their involvement and have a comprehensive understanding of what is expected of them. Another important ethical consideration in research is protection of vulnerable population. Because in conducting research, it is crucial to prioritize the protection of vulnerable populations. This includes individuals such as children, the elderly people with disabilities, and marginalized communities. Researchers must be diligent in selecting participants for their studies, taking into account the unique needs and circumstances of these populations. By doing so, they can ensure that the rights and well being of these individuals are safeguarded. Another important aspect of research ethics is maintaining the confidentiality of participants' information. Throughout the entire study, researchers have a responsibility to keep this information private and secure. This involves taking necessary precautions to prevent the sharing of participants' identities and personal data with anyone else. Whether it is during the data collection process or when analyzing and reporting the results, researchers must prioritize the privacy of their participants. Furthermore, researchers should strive to minimize any potential harm or discomfort that participants may experience. This can be achieved by avoiding sensitive or intrusive topics during the sampling process. Additionally, offering support services or resources to participants who may feel distressed is essential. It is also crucial to allow participants the freedom to leave the study at any time without facing negative consequences. By adhering to these ethical guidelines, researchers can conduct their studies in a responsible and respectful manner, protecting vulnerable populations, maintaining confidentiality, and avoiding harm are all fundamental principles that contribute to the integrity of the research. Another important ethical consideration is transparency and accountability. Researchers have a responsibility to be transparent and honest in their selection process for study participants. It is crucial for them to explain why certain individuals were chosen and acknowledge any limitations or biases that may arise during the research. This level of openness ensures that the research is trustworthy and can be verified by others. In addition, researchers must show respect for the cultural and ethical norms of the people they are studying. This requires adapting their methods and procedures to align with the culture and demonstrating respect throughout the research process. In some cases, researchers may even need to obtain permission from community leaders or other authorities before commencing their studies. Moreover, respecting cultural and ethical norms promotes inclusivity and diversity within the research. It recognizes that different communities have unique perspectives and experiences that should be acknowledged and valued. By embracing this diversity, researchers can gain a more comprehensive understanding of the topic they are studying and avoid perpetuating stereotypes or biases. Researchers have a duty to be open, respectful, and responsible in their studies. These principles not only uphold the rights and well being of participants but also enhance the credibility and validity of the research findings. Therefore, it is imperative for researchers to prioritize these ethical considerations throughout every stage of their study and conduct research that is trustworthy, inclusive, and beneficial to society as a whole. Now, I will discuss challenges in sampling. Sampling in research is a complex process that requires careful consideration to ensure accurate and reliable findings. And one of the main challenge researchers are facing is representativeness. That is, selecting a sample that truly represents the entire population being studied. This can be difficult due to various factors such as bias in the selection process and non selection bias and hidden populations. Certain groups may be hard to locate or unwilling to participate, further complicating the sampling process. One key aspect researchers must consider when selecting a sample is the potential for bias. Bias can occur at different stages of the sampling process, including the initial selection of participants and the response rate to the study. For example, if a researcher only selects participants from a specific demographic or geographic area, the sample may not accurately reflect the larger population. Similarly, if certain individuals are more likely to respond to the study than others, the findings may be skewed. To mitigate these biases, researchers must carefully consider their sampling methods and strive to include a diverse range of participants. Another challenge in sampling is identifying and reaching out to groups of people who may be difficult to find or reluctant to participate. This can be particularly problematic when studying sensitive topics or marginalized communities. Researchers must be proactive in their efforts to locate and engage with these groups, employing strategies such as community partnerships and targeted recruitment methods. By actively seeking out these populations, researchers can ensure a more comprehensive and inclusive sample. Non response bias is another challenge that researchers must address. This occurs when individuals chosen for the study do not participate or provide incomplete responses. This can introduce a bias if those who choose not to respond have different characteristics than those who do. To mitigate this issue, researchers can use techniques such as follow up surveys or incentives to encourage participants and increase the representativeness of the sample. Hidden populations pose yet another obstacle in sampling. These are groups of individuals who are difficult to identify or access, such as homeless individuals or illegal drug users. Since these populations are often excluded from traditional sampling methods, researchers must employ alternative strategies to include them in their studies. This may involve reaching out to community organizations or utilizing specialized sampling techniques specifically designed for hidden populations. Another challenge of sampling is sample size determination. Determining the appropriate sample size is again crucial in order to ensure that research findings are reliable and applicable to the larger population. However, this task can be challenging as it relies on various factors such as the level of variation within the population, the desired precision of the results, and the methodology employed in the research. Researchers must strike a balance between obtaining a sample size that is large enough to yield meaningful results while also avoiding the unnecessary allocation of resources to an excessively large sample. One common method for determining sample size is using statistical power analysis. This involves calculating the statistical power of a study, which is the probability of detecting an effect if it truly exists. By specifying the desired level of statistical power, researchers can then determine the minimum sample size needed to achieve this power. A higher statistical power requires a larger sample size. Researchers typically aim for a power of at least 80%, meaning they want an 80% chance of detecting an effect if it is present. However, some studies may require a higher power, especially if the effect being studied is expected to be small or if the consequences of missing the effect are significant. This approach ensures that the study has a high likelihood of detecting any real effects present in the population. Another factor to consider when determining the sample size is the level of variability within the population. If the population is highly homogeneous, meaning there is little variation among individuals, a smaller sample size may be sufficient. On the other hand, if the population is highly heterogeneous with significant differences among individuals, a larger sample size may be necessary to capture this variability and obtain accurate results. Understanding the characteristics of the population under study is therefore essential in determining an appropriate sample size. The desired precision of the results also play a role in determining the size of the sample. If a high level of precision is required, such as in medical research or opinion polls, a larger sample size is typically needed. This is because a larger sample reduces the margin of error and increases the confidence in the findings. Conversely, if a lower level of precision is acceptable, a smaller sample size may be adequate. The research methodology employed also influences the determination of sample size. For instance, if the research involves complex statistical analysis or subgroup comparisons, larger sample size may be necessary to ensure sufficient statistical power. Additionally, if the research design involves longitudinal studies or repeated measures, a larger sample size may be required to account for potential attrition or missing data. Researchers must carefully select the most appropriate methodology and consider its implications on sample size determination. But it is important to note that sample size alone does not guarantee the reliability of research findings. Other factors, such as the quality of data collection, the validity of measurement instruments, and the appropriateness of statistical analysis, also contribute to the overall reliability and validity of the research. Therefore, researchers must carefully consider all these factors in conjunction with sample size to ensure robust and meaningful results. Another important challenge of the sampling is sampling frame issues. Sampling frame problems can greatly impact the accuracy of a study's sample. A sampling frame is essentially a list or method used to identify individuals within a specific population that is being studied. However, there are several issues that can arise with sampling frames. Firstly, it is possible for the list to be incomplete, meaning that not everyone who should be included is actually on the list. This can lead to an insufficient number of people being represented in the sample. This can be responsible for a skewed representation of the population being studied. Inaccurate population estimates can further exacerbate this issue as it becomes difficult to ensure that the sample is truly representative of the entire population. Additionally, the information within the sampling frame may be outdated, which further compromises the accuracy of the sample. Certain groups of people may be difficult to reach, resulting in their exclusion from this study. These problems collectively contribute to a sample that does not accurately reflect the entire population. When individuals chosen for a sample do not respond or participate in the study, this can also result in a biased sample that does not accurately reflect the larger population. Non response bias can occur for various reasons, such as lack of interest, time constraints, or simply forgetting to respond. It is important to address non response bias by implementing strategies to encourage participation, such as follow up reminders or incentives. Another challenge of sampling is sampling bias. It is a significant issue and it can lead to inaccurate and biased results when trying to estimate information about a whole population. Sampling bias occurs when certain people or groups are either overrepresented or underrepresented in a sample. There are several common reasons why sampling bias occurs, such as self selection bias, non response bias, and sampling frame bias. Self selection bias happens when individuals choose to be part of a study themselves. This can skew the results because those who volunteer may have different characteristics or opinions compared to those who do not participate. Non response bias occurs when some people chosen for the study do not respond. This can introduce bias if those who choose not to respond have different perspectives or experiences than those who do. Another reason for sampling bias is sampling frame bias. It occurs when the list of people to choose from this study is not accurate. If the list of the sampling frame does not include all relevant individuals who should or includes those individuals who should not be included, the results will not accurately represent the population. So, if there is sampling bias, then the results will not accurately represent the population and it influence the validity of the findings. So, researchers must employ the right techniques and strategies to minimize this sampling bias. They need to carefully consider how they select participants for their study, ensuring that it is representative of the population they are studying. Additionally, researchers should make efforts to encourage participation and minimize non response bias by following up with non respondents or using other methods to gather data. Sampling errors are also responsible for bias. These errors refer to the discrepancies between the characteristics of the sample and the true characteristics of the population. These errors can occur due to chance variations in the selection process. Common types of sampling errors include undercoverage, where certain segments of the population are not adequately represented, and the selection bias, where the sample is systematically skewed towards certain characteristics. So, minimizing sampling errors is essential to ensure the validity or reliability of the research findings. Another important challenge that we should also discuss in sampling is accessing hard to reach population. Accessing hard to reach populations can be a significant challenge for researchers. These populations may include homeless individuals, undocumented immigrants, or those who are marginalized by the society. The difficulties in reaching these groups stem from a lack of resources, ethical concerns, and even legal obstacles. Consequently, obtaining a sample that accurately represents these populations becomes incredibly difficult. To overcome these challenges, researchers must think creatively and devise innovative methods to locate and include these individuals in their studies. Collaboration with community organizations and service providers may also be necessary to ensure success. Traditional sampling techniques, such as random sampling, may not be feasible with accessing to hard reach populations. Instead, researchers often rely on non probability sampling methods such as snowball sampling or purposive sampling. Snowball sampling involves identifying initial participants who then refer other potential participants, creating a chain like effect. Purposive sampling, on the other hand, involves deliberately selecting individuals who possess specific characteristics relevant to the study. While these techniques may not guarantee a fully representative sample, they provide valuable insights into the experiences and perspectives of these hard to reach populations. So, when we are dealing with hard to reach populations, we should also consider ethical aspects. Researchers must ensure that the rights and well being of participants are protected throughout the study. Informed consent becomes particularly challenging when working with individuals who may have limited understanding of research procedures or language barriers. Additionally, maintaining confidentiality can be difficult when participants fear repercussions or lack of trust in the research process. It is essential for researchers to establish rapport and build relationships with these populations to address these ethical aspects effectively. So, by prioritizing the dignity and autonomy of participants, researchers can navigate these complexities and conduct ethically sound studies. Another important aspect of these population is data collection methods. Collecting data from hard to reach populations requires flexibility and creativity. Traditional methods such as surveys or interviews may not be suitable due to various factors, including mistrust or discomfort. Researchers may need to explore alternative approaches such as participant observation or focus groups to gather meaningful data. Participant observation involves immersing oneself in the community or environment being studied, allowing for a deeper understanding of the population's experiences. Focus group, on the other hand, facilitate group discussions that encourage participants to share their thoughts and perspectives. So, by adapting data collection methods to fit the unique needs of these populations, researchers can obtain valuable insights that might otherwise be overlooked. Including hard to reach populations in research studies has significant implications for both academia and society. By amplifying the voices of marginalized individuals, researchers can shed light on social inequalities and advocate for change. The findings from these studies can inform policies and interventions aimed at addressing the specific needs of these populations. Moreover, involving these individuals in the research process empowers them and recognizes their expertise and lived experiences. This inclusive approach fosters a more comprehensive understanding of complex social issues and promote social justice. Ultimately, by overcoming the challenges associated with accessing hard to reach populations, researchers contribute to a more equitable and inclusive body of knowledge. Another important challenge is resource constraints. These constraints can pose significant challenges in conducting research. Resource constraints refer to limitations in time, funding, and personnel, which can hinder the proper execution of a study. Consequently, researchers are compelled to make crucial decisions regarding the number of individuals they can include in their research, the criteria for selecting participants, and the quality of data they can obtain. In such circumstances, it becomes imperative for researchers to adopt methods that are both efficient and cost effective while still yielding reliable and meaningful results. This is particularly crucial when resources are limited. One way researchers address resource constraint is by using sampling techniques. Instead of studying an entire population, researchers select a smaller group known as a sample to represent the larger population. By doing so, they can save time, money, and effort while still obtaining valid conclusions about the population as a whole. However, it is important for researchers to ensure that the sample is representative and unbiased, meaning it accurately reflects the characteristics and diversity of the larger population. Failure to do so may compromise the generalizability of the findings. Another way researchers deal with resource constraint is by utilizing existing data. Instead of collecting new data through surveys or experiments, researchers can analyze and interpret data that has already been collected by other researchers or organizations. This approach, known as secondary data analysis, allows researchers to answer research questions without incurring additional cost or time consuming data collection processes. However, it is important for researchers to critically evaluate the quality and reliability of the secondary data as it may not align perfectly with their specific research objectives. In addition to sampling techniques and secondary data analysis, researchers can also collaborate with other institutions or researchers to pool resources. By joining forces, researchers can share the burden of resource constraints and benefit from each other's expertise, equipment, and funding. Collaborative research projects allow for a more comprehensive and robust investigation as they provide access to a wider range of resources and perspectives. Moreover, collaboration fosters knowledge exchange and promotes interdisciplinary approaches, leading to innovative and impactful research outcomes. Lastly, researchers can employ creative problem solving techniques to optimize resource utilization. This involves thinking creatively and finding alternative solutions to gather data or conduct experiments. For example, researchers might use online surveys instead of in person interviews or they might utilize open source software instead of purchasing expensive software. By being resourceful and adaptable, researchers can overcome limitations and still produce high quality research outcomes. So, when conducting research, one of the challenges is ensuring that the findings can be applied to a larger group of people. This is known as sampling, and it involves selecting a subset of individuals from a population to study. To increase the chances of generalizing the results, researchers often use methods like probability sampling. However, there are still limitations to how much we can generalize our findings to bigger populations. To overcome this challenge, researchers need to carefully consider the characteristics of the sample and the population they are studying. They must also provide enough context and explanations when interpreting their results. By doing so, researchers can make their findings more trustworthy and useful. This is important because it allows us to learn more in different areas of study. In order to ensure that research findings can be applied to a larger group of people, researchers often use methods such as probability sampling. However, even if these methods, there are limits to how much we can generalize our findings. It is crucial for researchers to think about the characteristics of the sample and the population being studied. Additionally, providing sufficient context and explanations when interpreting the results is essential. By considering these factors, researchers can enhance the trustworthiness and usefulness of their findings. This is all for today. Thank you.